Hi, my name's Tyler Thurman. Some of you know me as Coach Ty, and I'm a transformative coach. I'm in the wonderful life business, and I support people to have more and more wonderful lives. And if you're interested in exploring my work beyond this video, feel free to check me out at my website, www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. There's a lot of fun resources you can explore there. I want to welcome you to this. It's a 3-part video series on what are called the 3 principles. So I'm going to spend one video each focusing on each one of the principles. And these principles were originally coined and pointed out by the theosopher and change agent Sydney Banks. And they're called mind, consciousness, and thought. And essentially, what these principles are they're pointing to the building blocks of the human experience. Now, why am I talking about these? I spend a lot of time focused on these principles, or at least what's behind these principles, and it's the foundation of the coaching work that I do with people. Because what I've found is that the value in simply understanding gets a bit of a bad rap in personal and professional development circles, but understanding the nature of the human experience and how the mind works is a game changer. It's a trump card. It is miraculous at times, the changes that I see in people and the transformations, when people simply understand how our experience works. And so you'll notice me talking and writing a lot about these principles in different ways, because what I do in large part as a coach is I point to these principles to my clients, and changes happen. People live more and more peaceful lives, loving, they feel more connected, joyful, less stress. They find themselves able to navigate their lives with ease and effortlessness. And the stress just melts away, and people have an access to wisdom that they find that they've never really noticed before or tapped into. And so I want to share a little bit of that with you here in these videos. Obviously, if you want to really deepen your experience, you can seek out personal coaching with me, but this is a great way to start. So I'm going to start out by talking about the first principle, and the one that I tend to talk about the most, because it's the one that we have some leverage over. But they're all extremely valuable, and you know, when it all boils down, they're all pretty much the same thing. But I'm going to talk about thought. So thought is one of the principles of how our experience of life unfolds. Now our thought is interesting, because we can look out on the world and other people and see pretty clearly that everybody thinks. We all have thought. But because it's going on inside of our minds, we tend not to talk about it all that much, and it tends to be kind of a fuzzy subject. You know, we're not really sure, because when you look within, we're not really taught to do that much, and to be able to distinguish what's actually going on when we look within. And so thought is actually the content of our experience of life. we live in an inside-out universe, meaning we can't actually have an emotional feeling experience of life without thought. So there's the world outside of our heads, which is the world of form, the world of solidity. This table here is solid. The walls around me are solid. That's the world of form. We seem to be able to observe the world of form, but we can't experience it directly. We can only actually ever experience our thinking about the world of form, or about the formless. Our thoughts can be about anything. And this makes a huge difference in people's lives when you begin to see it. So think about it this way. When you have a scary thought, you feel scared. When you have a sad thought, you feel sad. When you think a joyful thought, you feel joy. Those things don't come from outside us, those emotional experiences. They come from inside. So, in other words, you can't feel your partner, your spouse, can't have an emotional feeling from your boss, your job, your bank balance, your car, your house. Those things don't have inherent experiences attached to them because our experience comes from our thought. That's the reason why people who are in essentially the same circumstances can have wildly different experiences of life. And it's also the reason that people who are in horrific, quote-unquote, circumstances, like, concentration camps and things like that, or natural disasters, they can experience, people in those situations can experience profound peace and well-being. If you don't believe me, go read some of Viktor Frankl's work, Man's Search for Meaning. And then, on the flip side, it's also the reason that people who seem to have all the latest, greatest stuff and the most attractive partners and the biggest bank balances can and oftentimes do experience a lot of misery and suffering. It's because our experience of life comes from our thought, not from the world outside. And 99.9% of the world thinks that the outside world does create the inside world. And that's sometimes why it's so difficult to see, because everyone around us, all the big people, when we're growing up, all the big people around us are pointing outside themselves saying, he did it to me, she did it to me, it's their fault. They made me feel this way. My job is stressful. Well, the world and our experience doesn't work like that. It's just false. It's a fundamental, innocent misunderstanding of our experience of life. And like I said, it's innocent. We weren't taught it, and the world seems to have marshaled its forces against this truth. So I want to give you an analogy to think about, and it's like people are walking around with those virtual reality sunglasses. Have you ever seen those? You can buy them from like Sky Mall and Sharper Image, and essentially they're really cool gadgets where you've got these glasses, and instead of looking through the lens, there's images and pictures, so you can watch TV and movies that are being projected onto the lens of the glasses. So you're actually watching like TV. Now, we're all walking, our thinking is very similar to that, where we're all walking around as if we've got these virtual reality glasses on, and we've got these thoughts that are, flashing by like a film strip, and we mistake it for being the world of form, for being solid and being real. And so we're all walking around and we're seeing these images and having these experiences based on the images that are coming up on the screen in front of us. And we think it's real, and it's oftentimes it's scary and terrifying and meaningful, when in reality we're not looking at the world. We're looking at our own thinking. We're looking at our own thought projected out onto the world. And it's an interesting phenomenon. And so we don't realize what's really going on, so we can't actually address the problem as it stands, which is oftentimes we want to feel better. We want to have a more wonderful experience of life. And we think to get that, to change that experience, we have to change the world outside of us, because we think the world outside of us is the source of that experience. But once we understand that it's coming from the inside out, we can begin to look in a more useful direction and address address the problem and see some changes. So at this point in the conversation, I always stop to check with people, because if you're not experiencing sort of what I call shock and awe, then you probably haven't seen this for what it really is. Because it is one of those holy CRAP kind of moments. Because it changes everything about how we live our lives. And so if you haven't had that experience, stick with it, because it's a conversation that's worth being in and continuing to deepen your understanding. And at some point, I can almost guarantee you will see something wonderful and truly valuable. So stick with me. Now, just think about the impact this understanding would have on your life. If you understood that your experience was coming from your inner world and your inner world alone. So in other words, maybe not you are, but your experience of life is being created moment by moment, 100% through the way that you think about it. That's a game changer. So oftentimes when I talk about this, people that haven't quite got it yet, they say, well, yeah, I can see how thought might have something to do with my experience, and I can even see how thought maybe it plays a pretty large role in impacting my experience of life. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying thought creates our experience 100%. And now think about all of those things that we try to do in our lives to change our circumstances in an attempt to change how we feel. How much time we spend on that. It's an inordinate amount of time. It's crazy. And it's like when we try harder and harder, and we set bigger goals and try to achieve more and more, all to try to change how we feel more safe and secure, feel more love and connection. It's like you're running, and then you realize you're running in the wrong direction, but instead of changing directions, you just run faster. You can't run fast enough in the wrong direction for it to make a difference. So from here, the next place that people go, when people actually begin to understand, holy moly, holy crap, my experience of life is being created through my thought, then almost the natural place to go is, well, I got to control it. gotta grab it by the horns and wrestle it to the ground. And if you've ever attempted to do that for any period of time, you will probably have noticed, if you've been very conscious about it, that it doesn't work. It's sort of a pursuit that's, the fruits aren't worth the effort. And that's very much what positive thinking is. So most people, they hear what I'm saying and they think that it's positive thinking. And I'm not saying that at all. So I'm not saying we try to control our thoughts. I'm not saying we try to keep certain thoughts in and only let certain thoughts in and keep certain thoughts out. And that only positive thoughts are good. I'm just saying there's a tremendous value in simply understanding this principle of thought and all these principles. And understanding the nature of thought, how it works. So not controlling it, not trying to make it positive and only positive, but just understanding the system. So I'm going to ask you to put down the police baton and stop trying to direct your thought traffic. And just look at the nature of thought. So the first thing that I have people look at is the transitory nature of thought. It's always changing. And it's always changing unless we get in there and try to control it, which tends to keep it around longer and sort of makes it expand. But it's always flowing in and out if we let it. And so, since we feel our thinking, emotionally we feel our thinking, when the thought that we don't want flows out and another one flows in, we're going to have a different experience. So if we're not in there ruminating and trying to rev up our thoughts and think them harder, it'll just pass. The old saying, "This too shall pass." It's one of the most comforting notions in the world, and a lot of people refer to that in regards to the world of form. So, the physical world, it's always changing, everything about it, but it also applies to thought. It's almost more valuable in regards to thought because we get so caught up in our thinking and thinking that it's real and important, but it'll always pass, and something new will come along. Next is the illusory nature of thought. And when I say illusory, I mean that it's not real. It's like a mirage. My mentor, George Pransky, talks about it as a mirage, where you're looking at it, and it looks real, and oftentimes it looks real to everybody until you take a couple steps closer. And so what he says oftentimes is, look, it's a real mirage. So when you're in it, it sure looks and feels real. But when you have a deeper and deeper understanding of the nature of thought, gosh, you begin to see through it a lot more and a lot more quickly. And when you begin to see through it, oftentimes that helps it pass. It's like, oh, man, I feel like crap right now. I feel really afraid or anxious or angry. But it's just thought. Or even if you just suspect that it's thought, that crack is just enough, oftentimes, that suspicion, it's enough to allow some new thinking in. And then another element of thought is that it's arbitrary. So this is one of the biggest epiphanies that I've had so far, is that the thinking that I'm thinking now, I don't have to think that. That's not somehow inherent to me. It's not my thought. I mean, it kind of is, in the sense that I'm thinking it, but I don't have to think that thought. It's not real. It's an illusion. It's always passing. There's aren't some thoughts that are more real than others. It's just thought. And that's an incredibly comforting notion when you're caught up in thought and you're caught up in the feelings that go with it, because it feels very real. It feels very scary. And the last bit about the nature of thought that I find incredibly valuable in understanding is that we have an infinite potential for new thought in any moment. And what that means is we have an infinite potential for new experience in any moment, because our experience of life is being created by our thought. Projected outwards, remember? It's not coming from the world outside of us. And so when you begin to understand that thought is transitory, it's always changing, this too shall pass, it's illusory. It's not real. It's like a mirage. It's a real mirage, but you can see, once you see through it, you know it's not real. And it's arbitrary. You don't have to think that. That's not bound to you, that thought or that thinking. And we have an infinite potential for new thought and new experience in any moment. And when you deepen that, your experience of life, when you deepen your understanding of that, your experience of life will transform, and you'll deepen your capacity for love and joy and well-being. And we'll talk more about why that is in the next 2 videos. Thank you for joining me. Again, if you want to check me out at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. I look forward to seeing you there, and you can give me a call at 503-389-3778 if you want to explore one-on-one coaching with me. I look forward to continuing this conversation in the next video. Have a wonderful day.